Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to all of you here this beautiful May day. Please, if you haven't done so already, turn off your phones. If you have a joy or sorrow, please fill out the form at the back and get it up to me. Here, I'll cover them a little later in the service. If you're willing and able, please turn around, stand up, and wave to our friends on Zoom, and welcome to our friends on Zoom. If we have anybody that's new here today, please, if you want to find out more about our church, like to get on our newsletter, talk to Becky over here. Anyway, welcome to you all to Sky Island Unitarian Universalist Church, to our Sunday service. We have a few announcements to start off here. First off, please join us after the service in our community room. Some of us have bought cookies and munchies for a potluck. The free thinkers today will meet at 1 p.m. after our service, or after our social hour, actually. This coming Saturday, May the 18th at 1 p.m., there's Alice Easter's memorial service. Please sign up to bring finger food if you are able to do so. Another announcement, Tina's office hours will be Monday, May the 13th from 12:30 to 3:30 instead of on Tuesday this week. So if you want to meet with Tina, note the time change. And if you would like to meditate at 11 on Monday instead of Tuesday, please contact Tina. I have one other announcement, that on Thursday evenings in the park, there are free concerts for the next 2 months at 6:30. And if you haven't been to those, they're really worthwhile going to. And the price is quite reasonable. They're free.
Which park?
Veterans Park. Can you all hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Good. Okay, any other announcements that I have missed? I didn't mention, but my name is Lex Heron, and I'm your facilitator today. Actually, if you hadn't guessed, type of thing. The chalice lighting today is honoring our common connection and our uniqueness by Reverend Adam Slate. They were written, he served as an internship at Rosslyn Hill Unitarian Chapel in London. He is a candidate for UU Ministerial Fellowship and is pursuing a Master's of Divinity degree at Phillips Theological Seminary when they were written. We gather this morning as one community. Love, justice, diversity, freedom, mutual care, equity. Yet look around. Look at the faces of those around you. Each face represents an individual. Every one of us with our own story, needs, strengths, and faults. We light our chalice today honoring our common connection and also the uniqueness that lives within each one of us. We are a caring community and share what gives us joy and what weighs heavily on our heart. I will read the joys and sorrows that I have here, and any joys and sorrows on the Zoom, on the chat room, and if you would like to mute and speak them out loud at this very moment, we would like to hear them. Okay. And for each joy and sorrow that's said today, I will put stones in the water here to represent the sharing as the ripples spread out from the stone where it's dropped and spread out to the edge of the glass. When you figure it just like a lake, where you put a stone in the lake and the ripples move out. And so the sharing helps all of us in that joy and in the sorrow. I have a joy that Edna Weigel is in an acute rehab bed at Benson Hospital and is getting better and is able to walk further each day. Hopefully she may go home sometime this week, and she'd love to have any visitors. I have a sorrow here from Rita Battle. A friend of hers, Michelle's mother, passed away yesterday at age 93. Fortunately, she missed Mother's Day by just one day.
And it's a joy to have you here, Gwen. And he told me, I left you some magazines, and it didn't click. He's left me some Foreign Service Journal magazines. As a Foreign Service brat, I love getting those. And my mother used to work right next to the building. So it's like having my mother show up on Mother's Day. Thank you, Gwen.
And I'll also add some stones for the joys and the sorrows that remain unspoken. Let's take a moment and think about the joys and sorrows that you've heard, and think about perhaps some of the joys and sorrows that you have in your heart. Today, as you know, is Mother's Day. I'm going to address the gentleman here first. I hope you have spoken or thought about your mother, whether your mother is here with you today at this time or has passed on. And also, for those gentlemen that have not recognized their mother or their spouse or their partner, 2024 may be a bad year. So do so. You still have time. I'd like to share with you just a little bit about Mother's Day. Some of you may already know this, but I'm going to tell you about it again if you do know about it. As you know, Mother's Day is a holiday honoring motherhood that's observed in different forms throughout the world. The celebration of mothers and motherhood can be traced back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, who held festivals in honor of the mother goddess Rhea and Cybele. But the clearest modern precedent for Mother's Day is the early festival, Christian festival, known as Mothering Sunday. And just a little trivia here. Did you know more phone calls are made on Mother's Day than any other day of the year? These holiday chats often cause the phone system to slow down, and the amount is something like 37% higher than normal phone traffic. So if you're going to call Mum, you may have to wait a little bit. The origins of Mother's Day, as celebrated in the United States, date back to the 19th century. In the years before the Civil War, Anne Reeves Jarvis of Western Virginia helped start Mother's Day work clubs to teach local women how to properly care for their children. These clubs later became a unifying force in a region of the country still divided over the Civil War. In 1868, Jarvis organized Mothers' Friendship Day, at which mothers gathered with former Union and Confederate soldiers to promote some reconciliation, which was a good idea. Another precursor to Mother's Day came from the abolitionist and suffragette Julia Ann Ward. In 1870, Ward wrote the Mother's Day Proclamation, a call to action that asked mothers to unite in promoting world peace. In 1873, Howe campaigned for a Mother's Peace Day to be celebrated every June the 2nd. Other early Mother's Day pioneers include Juliet Calhoun Blakey, a temperance activist who inspired a local Mother's Day in Albion, Michigan in the 1870s. Also, the duo of Mary Towles Sessom and Frank Herring both worked to organize a Mother's Day in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Some have even called Herring the father of Mother's Day, and I want to point out that that's Herring, not my last name, Heron. The official Mother's Day holiday arose in the 1900s as the result of efforts of Anne Jarvis, daughter of Anne Reeves Jarvis. Following her mother's 1905 death, Anne Jarvis conceived of Mother's Day as a way of honoring the sacrifices mothers made for their children. After gaining financial backing from a Philadelphia department store owner named John Wanamaker, in May 1908, she organized the first official Mother's Day celebration at a Methodist church in Grafton, West Virginia. That same day also saw thousands of people attend a Mother's Day event at one of Wanamaker's retail stores in Philadelphia. This Wanamaker was a smart cookie. Following the success of the first Mother's Day, Jarvis, who remained unmarried and childless her whole life, resolved to see her holiday added to the national calendar, arguing that American holidays were biased towards male achievements. She started a massive letter-writing campaign to newspapers, prominent politicians, and urging the adoption of a special day honoring motherhood. By 1912, many states, towns, and the churches had adopted Mother's Day as an annual holiday, and Jarvis had established the Mother's Day International Association to help promote her cause. Her persistence paid off in 1914 when President Woodrow Wilson signed a measure officially establishing the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day. Just a final tidbit, Jarvis had originally conceived Mother's Day as a day of personal celebration between mothers and families, and her version involved the wearing of a white carnation as a badge and visiting one's mother or attending church services. But once Mother's Day became a national holiday, it was not long before florists, card companies, other merchants capitalized on the popularity. And so by 1920, Jarvis had become disgusted with how the holiday had been commercialized, and she outwardly denounced the transformation and urged people to stop buying Mother's Day flowers, cards, and candies. She obviously wasn't successful because we still do that. I wanted to close with my little bit here. I want to share with you a poem I found about Mother's Day. And this was written by Lynn Cass Stevens, and it was written in May the 5th, 2008. Lord, are there roses in your garden on the shores of Jubilee? Would you pick a dozen of your best and deliver them to me? For you see, today is Mother's Day, and I can't visit my mum. For it wasn't very long ago the angels came and took her home. So, if there are roses in your garden on the shores of Jubilee, would you pick a dozen of your best and deliver them to me? Would you take them to my mother and tell her that I love her? Tell her that I miss her in oh so many ways. But I have joy in knowing we'll meet again someday and we'll pick roses together on the shores of Jubilee.
So our reading for today comes from Julia Ward, who was born an Episcopalian, but saw the light by 1941 and became Unitarian. She also met Samuel Gridley Howe, who was a doctor, also a reformer. He had started Perkins School for the Blind. He was 18 years older. And as their marriage went on, it was not good. But it pushed her because of the difficulties of her life. She was a reformer, but she was a fiercer reformer because they had so many children, and she would not have been able to keep her children if she had divorced her husband. She had to wait till he died to be a little more free in life, sadly. So she wrote in 1870, soon after the Civil War, she wrote what we call a Mother's Day proclamation. She had a longer, more Victorian title for it. But it was a Mother's Day proclamation for peace, as Lex said. And this is how it goes. Arise then, women of this day. Arise, all women who have hearts. Whether our baptism be that of water or of tears, say firmly, we will not have great questions decided by irrelevant agencies. Our husbands shall not come to us reeking with carnage for caresses and applause. Our sons shall not be taken from us to unlearn all that we have been able to teach them of charity, mercy, and patience. We women of one country will be too tender of those of another country to allow our sons to be trained to injure others. From the bosom of the devastated earth, a voice goes up with our own. It says, disarm, disarm. The sword of murder is not the balance of justice. Blood does not wipe out dishonor, nor violence vindicate possession, as men have often forsaken the plow and the anvil at the summons of war. Let women now leave all that may be left of home for a great and earnest day of council. Let them meet first as women to bewail and commemorate the dead. Let them then solemnly take counsel with each other as to the means whereby the great human family can live in peace, each bearing after his own kind the sacred impress, not of Caesar, but of God. In the name of womanhood and of humanity, I earnestly ask that a general Congress of Women without limit of nationality be appointed and held at some place deemed most convenient, and at the earliest period consistent with its objects, to promote the alliance of the different nationalities, the amicable settlement of international questions, the great and general interests of peace. Oh, if only they could have done that in 1870. Think what we would have avoided. So, who here thinks Mother's Day might be a bit complicated? I mean, first of all, who here has a really pure and clean and comprehensive and non-confusing relationship with your mother, whether she's alive or dead? Oh, you do. Oh, two of you do. I want to talk to you later. You know, it's, as Lex said, there are so many reasons we celebrate Mother's Day. There's so many historical times we tried to do it. But it's also such a complicated relationship. And even if your mother is no longer alive, or if she is, your relationship continues to grow. How many of you feel your relationship with your dead mother is still growing? Yeah, it is, right. And hopefully getting better. This week, Sam, it's funny where I get my sources. I get an email every day from the New York Times about ideas for cooking, which usually don't coincide with what my family will eat. But when I'm alone, I love cooking it. And Sam Sifton, who does a lot of them, wrote on May 10th, "Good morning. It's Mother's Day weekend for all those who celebrate, which is many of us, even if she's been gone a few years now and didn't like the holiday anyway. Mom's getting younger in memory, and we're getting older to meet her at the pass. The relationship's deepening. It's easier to understand some of her tics and motivations now, her points of view." And earlier in the week, the New York Times wrote a lovely article. Catherine Pearson put it together, an ode to those who mother us. And the premise is that we are mothered by more than just actual biological mothers, right? Do you agree? Yeah. And so she had people send in their stories, and they were beautiful. I recommend, if you get the New York Times, to look for it. It left me in tears, but good tears. In one instance, a young woman was heading to England to study at a university, and her mother died the week before she left. As she was picked up by this family, this British family that was supposed to orient her, the mother obviously knew what had happened and said, "It's okay to cry." And she said, "I burst into tears and I couldn't stop." And even though this family was only supposed to watch over me for 2 weeks, they kept in touch with me and brought me home almost every weekend, and I'm still in touch with them 25 years later. We have all been mothered by someone other than our biological mother. Oh, and one of my favorite, there's one from Fallon Alvarez. She's 35. She lives in Portland, Oregon. She says she comes from a multicultural background, but her Puerto Rican side of the family lived far away from her. Her best friend's mom, Alina, was Puerto Rican. And so she taught me so much about my culture. Going to the store was a lesson in salsa music. Visiting a theme park was a vocabulary lesson. Fallon, ven aquí. Taking a shower was a lesson in how to care for my hair, and holidays were a lesson in large family gatherings and delicious food. All of these little things added up to a more full picture of my culture. Without Alina, I wouldn't know a part of myself. So we have been mothered by, and I would think we have been nurtured by those who do not identify themselves as female as well. When I was in seminary, I took courses at a Methodist seminary called Wesley in the DC area. And we wanted to do Mother's Day. And I know I've talked about this before, but we wanted to do it with some nuance because it's not an easy day. And so we had different people speak. A woman who wanted to have children but didn't have any. A woman who had a terrible relationship with her mother. Another person who'd lost a child. And at the end, an African student stood up and said, "Wow, I feel like you have really celebrated Mother's Day because it took a village to raise me, and you've made me think of all my aunties who raised me." And so how does beloved community, which is part of our theme for today, come together with Mother's Day? What is the mashup here? Well, I wanted to think about those kinds of villages that nurture and raise us, right? And we want them to be the best they can be, just like we wanted our relationship with our mother to be better, right? Maybe if you're human, you thought that. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about beloved community and how to create a village that works and nurtures and makes a stand against peace together. So Unitarians know a lot about utopian communities. In Massachusetts in the early 19th century, there was Hopedale Community, Brook Farm, and started by Bronson Alcott, we had Fruitlands. And at Fruitlands, they didn't use animal products or use animals for labor. So his daughter, Louisa May Alcott, wrote a farce about being forced to be a beast of burden and plow the field. None of them could survive financially. People argued like good Unitarians do. They disbanded and did not last forever. When I really look at the word beloved, the phrase beloved community, it was coined by the philosopher Josiah Royce, who helped found the Fellowship of Reconciliation. This is a group that started in 1914 to support people who did not want to partake in World War I, not a very popular position to take in this country then and in the world. And the Fellowship of Reconciliation still exists and still does a lot to try to help people understand what's happening in the world. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a member, and he took beloved community and fleshed it out. The King Center says, it's timeless, but King really coined it and made it more defined. And here are the 5 definitions of it that they come up with. Given our shared desire to be peaceful, happy, and safe, the beloved community described a practical, realistic, and achievable society, not a utopian community where you don't eat animals, unfortunately. 2, in the beloved community, conflict still exists, but we resolve it peacefully, non-violently, without hostility or ill will. 3, in the beloved community, we recognize the interdependent nature of all life. Sound familiar? We appreciate, recognize, and value the inherent worth of all people, animals, and ecosystems. 4, in the beloved community, kindness, compassion, and love for all life motivates our actions. We work cooperatively to peacefully end hunger, prejudice, poverty, homelessness, climate change, environmental destruction, factory farming, violence, injustice of all kinds. And 5, in the beloved community, the means we use to create change are just as kind and compassionate as the ends we seek. Now, over and over again, the emphasis is on nonviolent resolution of conflict. And as King would say, we have to resolve things nonviolently so that afterwards we'll have this beloved community where both sides belong and get along and can work together. Oh, I wish that we had him here today to help us face what's happening in the Ukraine and in the Middle East. How do you non-violently resolve these terrible conflicts and conflicts that have gone on for centuries? How do we do that? But his call to beloved community is a start towards that. One of the things the King Center says is we have to work on our own selves first. We really have to take a deep breath and try to understand peace really has to begin with us. We have to understand when someone inflames our ire, what is it echoing in me? Peace really has to begin with us. But then in a community, there are things we can do together. And John Lewis, in the story that we just heard that he wrote about experiencing as a young child, experienced, running from one side of a house to another, holding the hands of 15 other children to hold the house down. And he says what's so amazing, more than as half a century later, is that it seems a lot like the way life was in the 1960s at the height of the civil rights movement. America itself felt as if it might burst at the seams. So much tension, so many storms. But the people of conscience never left the house. They never ran away. They stayed. They came together. They did the best they could, clasping hands and moving toward the corner of the house that was the weakest. And then another corner would lift, and we would go there. And eventually, inevitably, the storm would settle. The house would still stand. But we knew another storm would come, and we would have to do it all over again. And we did, and we still do. All of us, you and I, children holding hands, walking with the wind. We are called within community, within this community, to really gather our forces and hold hands and do so much more together than we could do alone, right? When Julia Ward Howe wrote her proclamation, it was both a terrible time and an eye-opening time caused by the Civil War. Many, many mothers had lost their sons and were grieving that. But as Heather Richardson writes in her weekly blog, women had started to see how much power they could have. During that war, as during so many, women had had to take on a lot of the work, had had to do a lot of their own finances, and they thought they could keep all that after the war was over. And then came the 14th Amendment, which gave black men the right to vote, but not women. And so she became a suffragette, she became an ardent voice, especially for peace. But she never gave up. She found a way to walk with the wind and keep speaking till she was 91. And all of us here in this community can find a way to work together. Catherine May, whose book on enchantment I keep on quoting because I'm enchanted by it, talks about looking for congregation. She says, I'm fairly certain that God, however you conceive of them, didn't plan for any of us to be racist. Every one of us has some kind of work to do. A spiritual practice that blankets us in the analgesic of self-acceptance is just a bandage for our narcissism. Congregations, ones that are allowed to express diversity of thought, hold us to account. I tend to think that God is not a person, but the sum total of all of us across time. That only makes the imperative greater. We have a duty to witness the broad spectrum of humanity, rather than to defend our own corner of it. That is the work I crave, the sense of contact, the possibility it might change me in ways I can't predict, the possibility that I might one day do better. Her concern is that sometimes in community, if we're in an echo chamber community, we just comfort ourselves and each other. We need to encourage diversity. We need to listen to the difference so that we can then see what really needs to happen. And maybe how to do it together. Maybe if we do our inner work, stay in this space of conscience, and act together, walking to where the house is rising. Do I need to remind you of all the places where the house is rising in our world today? We can do, even if it's just a little bit, together. So on this Mother's Day, I know all of you hear words of wisdom from people who mother you, right? Right? Are they still speaking in your ear? Is their humor still with you? Sometimes they were right about things and we didn't realize till long after they were gone, right? Maybe that voice of conscience gets toxic, but maybe sometimes it's a good voice. So I encourage all of us to build the beloved, practical, conscious, and conscience-filled beloved community together. Thank you.
Our closing words are our connection to each other and this community remains by Reverend Kathy A. Huff. She served as a UU minister in congregations in Massachusetts and California, has served as executive director of the Berkeley Public Library Foundation since 2015. And the closing words are, our time in this place may have ended, but our connection to each other and this community remains. Together we may walk the path of justice, speak words of love, live the selfless deed, trod gently upon the earth, and fill the world with compassion. We will now have the postlude.